Be his biggest cheerleader and speak words of life. There you go. Biggest cheerleader and speak words of life. Maybe you don't know this, but I'm just going to let you know in case you weren't aware that most men struggle heavily with insecurity. We think it's just women. We think we're the only ones. Most men heavily struggle with insecurity. Many struggle with unresolved wounds from their childhood. Many had, horrible things happen in their childhood, and then they're these, wounded men walking around pretending like everything's together, but inside not so much. That's often why a man will start self-medicating with alcohol or pornography or whatever to comfort himself, to numb out. Sometimes it manifests as anger issues, also if there are these unresolved wounds. But a lot of our men are struggling with insecurity and unresolved wounds. And your husband needs you to be his encourager, to believe in him, to see something good in him and call it out. Proverbs 18:21, we've talked about this verse so many times, right? The tongue has the power of life and death. So how are your words working? Are they bringing life to your husband, or are they bringing death to your husband? The way I like to put it is like, when he walks in the door at the end of the day, is it like encountering a buzzsaw? Because I had one husband say that's what it was like for him to encounter his wife when he walked in the door. It's like walking into a buzzsaw. Probably not good, right? But instead, wouldn't it be great to be his cheerleader, right? Get the vision for that. Also, Proverbs 12:25 says, anxiety weighs down the heart, but a kind word cheers it up. Could you be that vessel that plants that kind word for your husband? If you want your husband to open his heart to you and be, vulnerable and open with you about what he's really thinking about, his fears, his hopes, his dreams, he needs for you to truly be for him and believe in him. Get the vision of that. Like, he's not going to open up to you unless he believes that you are truly for him. Right? And so how can you show that? By kind, encouraging words, by speaking life to him. And by the way, this is actually the founding principle for Squadron of Sisters. God gave me a vision when we first started Squadron of Sisters, which is almost 10 years ago now, unbelievable. But he spoke this phrase to me. Some of you have heard me say this before, but some of you may have never heard this. He spoke this phrase to me. He said, teach the women how to esteem their husbands to greatness, which was kind of an odd phrase. I'd never heard that before, but I know it was from the Lord. And he was trying to plant a vision in my heart, and hopefully your hearts too, that we have the ability, because of our close relationship with our husbands, to be the person that is so building them up, so encouraging them, so exhorting them, so reminding them of all the talents and abilities that God has given them, and encouraging them when they're feeling deflated, that we can actually esteem them so much that they would step up and have the courage to do the hard stuff, to become better men, to become better husbands, to become better fathers, to become just better representatives of the Lord, when we are so encouraging them, so esteeming them, that they're like, okay, she believes in me. I think I can do this. I'm willing to do what it takes to step out there with courage and do the hard things, right? Esteem your husband to greatness. Number 2, key to gaining entry to your husband's heart, treat him with honor and respect. Now, we've all heard this before, and we're like, okay, move on to the next point. But let's really unpack this, okay? Men crave respect like we crave chocolate. Right? It's just like, they just crave respect. I've cited this survey before, but it's still, every time I read it, I'm like, wow. In a large survey, when men were asked if they'd rather be loved and disrespected, or completely unloved, but at least respected, 80% of men say they would rather be unloved as long as they were respected. Now see, it would be the flip, the opposite equation, right, for most women. We're like, no, I have to be loved. That's really important. But for men, are like, I don't need that so much. I need respect. Ephesians 5:33 is a biblical command for the wife to respect her husband, right? And I've learned that so many of the commands in the Bible are not based on feelings. It doesn't ever say, when you finally feel respect your husband, then go ahead. When you finally feel like letting go of resentment, then go ahead. When you finally feel like being kind and loving to that person that just annoys the dickens out of you at work, then be nice to them. It doesn't ever say that. It just says, do this. Like an action word, like a choice to behave a certain way. And it's certainly the case for respect. It doesn't say, wives, respect your husbands when you finally feel like it. No. when you just show respect, you just choose to show respect. Whenever he does finally share any fears, worries, hopes, dreams, plans, or insecurities, avoid criticism and fault finding and be a quiet and gentle listener instead. You need to be a safe place for his heart. This is probably one of my favorite topics to talk about, being a safe place for your husband's heart. Because often when, I don't know what it is about, I think because women are wired to want security, so whenever a husband comes up with a plan, an idea, how many of you have husbands who've come up with some kind of crazy plan, you're like, what? I'm surprised it's not more than that. Raise your hand high, I really have to see. Okay, that's what I thought. Because they're kind of wired to be dreamers often, and so what do we feel like our job is in that moment? To tear apart this ridiculous plan and point out the flaws, right? I mean, that's just like our natural tendency. I've got to jump in here and say like, whoa, that's crazy! And immediately, they shut right back down again because we immediately jumped into fault finding, criticizing, right? There's a better way to go about this. I want to show you a couple of scriptures that we can park on for a moment. James 1, verse 19. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Your husband is never going to open up to you if you criticize his ideas and find fault with everything. He's just not going to do it. I have an analogy here. He's kind of like a turtle. Husbands are kind of like turtles. Most of the time, they hide under the protective shell. It's like, it's a scary world out there. You know, every time I try to, share a plan or idea or something, my wife just comes along and annihilates me, so he just retreats back underneath the shell for cover, right? And you're like, why won't he open his heart to me? Why won't he share with me? Why don't we have any emotional intimacy? And it's like, I'm hiding under the shell here because it's not safe out there. So our job is to make it a safe place for him to open up his heart, which means we have to stop with the fault finding, pointing out all his problems, all that kind of thing. I know a woman whose husband, actually I think I know two women, whose husbands wanted to sell everything they own and buy a sailboat and sail around the world. I think I've met two now that have had that same wacky idea. And it's so tempting in that moment, especially if you have children and everything, to think, are you a moron? I mean, like, why in the world would we do that? That is the most ludicrous thing. But what is a better way of handling that in that moment? How about a gentle probing question, not like an interrogation kind of question, or like, are you a crazy person question, but just say something like, well, that's an interesting idea. Tell me more about that. Just let him talk. And then you just kind of maybe ask some gentle questions like, so how do you think that would work out with the kids' schooling?